The morning sky over Tokyo glows crimson on April 7th, 1945. Captain Masao Swanaga tightens his leather flight gloves inside the narrow cockpit of his Ki-84 Hayate fighter, the most advanced aircraft the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force has ever built. At Chofu Airfield, about 20 miles west of the capital, a deep rumble echoes across the horizon, the sound that every Japanese pilot now recognizes with dread. Another formation of American B-29 superfortresses is heading toward the heart of Japan. But something is unusual today. Swanaga's radio comes alive with static and anxious voices from ground control. Unknown fighters. Silver aircraft approaching from the southeast. He frowns. Southeast. That makes no sense. The closest American fighter bases are more than 600 miles away on Saipan, far beyond the reach of any escort fighter he has ever faced. At 28, Captain Swanaga is a veteran. He has fought in the skies over the Philippines, clashed with P-38 Lightnings, faced F-6F Hellcats during carrier raids, and even encountered the formidable F-4U Corsairs near Okinawa. But those were battles near American positions or naval fleets. Over Japan's homeland, the skies have always belonged to him and his comrades. Sergeant Yamamoto, his ground crew chief, strikes the side of the cockpit in alarm. Captain, emergency scramble. Unknown fighters approaching Tokyo from the south. Swanaga's pulse quickens. From the south. His mind races. The Americans captured Iwo Jima only 5 weeks ago, but that island lies over 650 miles away. No fighter aircraft in existence can fly that far. Fight. And return. It defies every law of aerodynamics. As his Nakajima Ha-45 engine roars to life, Swanaga catches a flicker of silver on the horizon. These shapes are not the dark silhouettes of carrier-based fighters. They move with a strange, effortless grace. They should not be here. They should not even be possible. All units scramble immediately. Comes the urgent command through his headset. Unidentified fighters over central Tokyo. Swanaga accelerates down the runway, the vibration rattling through his legs. In 3 years of combat, he has never heard such fear in ground control's voice. As his Ki-84 rises into the cool morning air and climbs toward 15,000 feet, a single question fills his mind. How did American fighters reach Tokyo? What Captain Swanaga cannot yet realize, what no Japanese pilot can imagine at this moment, is that he is witnessing the dawn of a new era in aerial warfare. The shining aircraft racing toward Tokyo are not ordinary fighters. They are symbols of a revolution in aviation technology that will forever change the balance of power in the skies. The age of the long-range P-51 Mustang has begun. To understand the shock gripping Captain Swanaga, one must first understand what fighter pilots believed to be true in 1945. Every aircraft before this moment obeyed the same unbreakable rule. Greater range always demanded sacrifice. More fuel meant less speed and agility. More endurance meant fewer weapons. A pilot could go far or fight hard, but never both. The Japanese knew this truth well. Their most famous aircraft, the A-6M-0, could travel vast distances, but only because it lacked armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and pilot protection. Its light frame made it a legend early in the war, but also a fragile one. When American gunners struck it, the Zero often turned into a fireball. Japanese pilots grimly nicknamed it the Flying Coffin. Therefore, when those silver P-51 Mustangs appeared over Tokyo, slicing through the sky with both range and power, they defied everything pilots had believed possible. It was not just a new airplane arriving in the war. It was the end of an era, and for Japan, the beginning of an unstoppable storm. American fighters had always embodied a different design philosophy. They were built to be powerful, heavily armed, and capable of surviving damage that would destroy most enemy planes. But they were limited by one weakness range. The P-47 Thunderbolt, for example, carried 8 50 caliber machine guns and could absorb tremendous punishment. But it could only travel about 300 miles from its base before turning back. The twin-engine P-38 Lightning could fly farther, but it still depended on forward bases close to the front lines. Because of these limitations, Japan had long held a critical defensive advantage. As long as American fighters could not escort bombers all the way to the Japanese mainland, Japanese pilots could focus their attacks on unprotected B-29s. Every bomber crew crossing into Japan's airspace knew they were alone once they reached the coast. Lieutenant Akira Watanabe, stationed at Haneda Airfield with his Ki-61 Hien, had shaped his entire strategy around that fact. The Americans come in heavy and slow. He told his wingman only 2 days before. Their fighters always turn back at the coast. That's when we strike. At 06:47 in the morning, climbing through 12,000 feet in formation with 5 other Japanese fighters, Watanabe spots movement below. Sleek silver aircraft are diving toward the massive Nakajima aircraft factory at Musashino, but something feels wrong. These are not bombers. They are single-engine fighters, moving with the sharp, confident rhythm of planes operating near home. Control, this is Lightning 3. Watanabe radios urgently, using his call sign. I count 15. No, 20 single-engine fighters attacking the Musashino plant. Type unknown. The radio bursts into chaos as other pilots across Tokyo report the same sight. American fighters are flying freely over the capital, striking with precision hundreds of miles from any known Allied base. Captain Tomojiro Ogawa, leading the 103rd Sentai from Kashiwa Airfield, is one of Japan's top aces, credited with 25 victories. He has fought the Americans over the Philippines, Okinawa, and in countless homeland defense missions. But when he closes to within 1,000 yards of these new intruders, he realizes he is facing something unlike anything he has ever seen. The aircraft are sleek, almost beautiful in their deadliness. Their wings curve gracefully, reminding him of the British Spitfire, but their long, pointed noses give them a more menacing presence. Most curious of all, they carry large external fuel tanks beneath their wings. Yet they move like fighters at the start of a mission, not like machines running low on fuel. Ogawa stares in disbelief. Impossible, he mutters into his mask. Those tanks should be empty by now. What Captain Ogawa does not yet understand is that he is witnessing a turning point in aviation history. The aircraft before him are the result of a perfect combination of American engineering and British innovation, the North American P-51 Mustang, powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. This partnership has produced a fighter that defies the old rules of air combat. These Mustangs have flown more than 675 miles from Iwo Jima to Tokyo, engaged in intense combat, and still possess enough fuel to return home. The P-51D Mustang carries 184 gallons of fuel internally and 2 additional 108-gallon tanks under its wings. Because of the Merlin V1650 engine's efficiency, this configuration gives the Mustang an extraordinary combat radius of more than 850 miles. Therefore, for the first time in the war, American bombers could count on fighter protection all the way to their targets over Japan and back again. This technological leap represents more than mechanical progress. It is a symbol of a nation's industrial strength, its scientific discipline, and its will to adapt under pressure. The Japanese pilots who looked up that April morning saw not just new airplanes, but the end of their era of dominance. The silver Mustangs above Tokyo announced a new chapter in the air, war one that Japan could no longer control. Flight Sergeant Kenji Nakamura dives his Ki-84 toward the advancing American formation and feels his understanding of air combat begin to collapse. He grips the control stick tightly as a chilling thought flashes through his mind. If the Americans can reach Tokyo, then nowhere in Japan is safe. There is no place left to retreat. These intruders are not merely appearing over the capital. They are hunting with intent and precision. Leading the American formation is Major Robert W. Moore of the 15th Fighter Group's 45th Squadron. From his altitude, he spots Captain Tomojiro Ogawa's Ki-84 climbing toward the B-29 bombers and banks sharply to intercept. What follows shatters every Japanese assumption about long-range enemy aircraft. The Americans are not conserving fuel or avoiding combat. They are attacking with speed, discipline, and confidence. Major Moore's P-51 Mustang, still carrying nearly 200 gallons of fuel after the 700-mile flight from Iwo Jima, dives powerfully toward its target. Its Packard-built Merlin V1650-7 engine produces 695 horsepower in emergency combat mode, driving the aircraft past 400 miles per hour in a near-vertical descent. For any other long-range fighter, such a maneuver would be reckless, even suicidal. But Moore's Mustang responds like a predator in pursuit. Captain Ogawa reacts instantly. He rolls left and drops altitude, hoping to escape. But the Mustang stays locked behind him. The American fighter moves with ease, its remaining fuel giving Moore the freedom to fight aggressively, something Japanese pilots believed impossible for an aircraft that had traveled so far. Watching these silver planes dominate the sky over Tokyo, the Japanese realize a frightening truth. The familiar rules of air combat no longer apply. The balance of the air war has shifted, and no one had warned them. The battle begins at exactly 06:58 over Musashino. Captain Masao Suwanaga, joining the engagement, feels as though he is fighting against ghosts. The enemy aircraft seem to defy the limits of range, endurance, and physics. They twist and climb with an energy that should have been impossible for planes that had just flown across the Pacific. Over his headset, Major Moore's calm voice breaks through the static. "Blue Flight, drop tanks now. We've got company." Suwanaga watches in disbelief as the American fighters release their external fuel tanks. They are not empty. The Mustangs are preparing for battle with plenty of fuel remaining. He whispers into his mask, "That's impossible. Those tanks should have been dry 50 miles ago." One of the silver Mustangs banks upward and turns directly toward Suwanaga's Ki-84. The Japanese pilot steadies his aim, ready to fight as he has done many times before. In every previous encounter, American fighters would break off quickly to conserve fuel. But this one does not hesitate. It climbs with purpose. The two aircraft close head-on at a combined speed of more than 700 miles per hour. Suwanaga fires first, his twin 12, 7mm machine guns and twin 20mm cannons blazing. Bright orange tracers cut through the sky toward the Mustang. Moore responds instantly, unleashing a storm of 6 50-caliber machine guns, each firing 850 rounds per minute. The air fills with streaks of light and thunder. At the final moment, both pilots break Suwanaga veering right, Moore banking left. But Moore does not disengage. Instead, he reverses into a steep climbing turn, pressing the attack with relentless precision. Suwanaga strains against the G-forces, pulling his aircraft into a desperate spiral. "This is insane," he gasps into his radio. How much fuel do these aircraft carry? For the Japanese pilots fighting over their homeland that morning, the answer is more than technical. It is psychological. The P-51 Mustang represents a terrifying new reality. American fighters now have both the range and power to rule Japan's skies. The age of sanctuary is over. And with it, the last illusion of safety in the Empire's homeland defense. What Captain Swanaga cannot see is that Major Moore's P-51D began its mission with an astonishing 400 gallons of fuel, more than double the capacity of any Japanese single-engine fighter, even after traveling 675 miles from Iwo Jima. The Mustang still holds around 200 gallons, enough for a full hour of high-intensity combat and the long flight back to base. This single fact alone is rewriting the logic of aerial warfare over Japan. 3 miles away, Lieutenant Akira Watanabe is facing a nightmare of his own. He has engaged 2 P-51Ds at once, but they are not behaving like the cautious, fuel-conscious enemies he expects. Instead, they move in a coordinated rhythm, attacking in seamless succession. Their timing, precision, and control reveal endless hours of disciplined training and complete confidence in their aircraft. Desperation fills his voice as he calls out over the radio, "Control! This is Lightning 3. These fighters, they're not breaking off. They're not saving fuel. How is this possible?" Captain John B., Hampshire, leading another group of Mustangs from the 506th Fighter Group, hears the confusion filling the Japanese airwaves. Speaking calmly to his wingman, Lieutenant Robert Carr, he answers the question that every Japanese pilot is asking. They don't understand, do they? We can stay and fight. We can stay and hunt. We can strike anywhere in their empire and still make it home. The psychological blow to the Japanese defenders is immediate. Their entire defense system has depended on a single assumption that American fighters cannot remain over Japan for long. That belief dies in the skies above Tokyo. The sight of Mustangs flying fearlessly, unhurried, and seemingly limitless in endurance drains the confidence of even the most experienced Japanese aces. Lieutenant Watanabe's Kitasun 61 Hien, riddled with holes from repeated hits by 50 caliber rounds, begins to lose power. Yet he refuses to disengage, believing the Americans must be near empty on fuel. He tries to outlast them, hoping they will break off first. But the assumption proves fatal. Captain Hampshire, knowing his Mustang can fight for hours longer, patiently maneuvers into position. His 6 machine guns fire in a concentrated burst, striking Watanabe's engine with devastating accuracy. The Kawasaki Hei 40 engine erupts in a plume of oil and smoke. Watanabe's final transmission, intercepted by ground control across Tokyo, is broken and filled with disbelief. They're not leaving. They're not running out of fuel. How did they get here? Meanwhile, over the burning Nakajima factory, Captain Tomojiro Ogawa, one of Japan's most skilled and decorated pilots, finds himself in a deadly duel with Major Moore's P-51D. For 3 minutes, an eternity in aerial combat. They twist and dive through the smoke-filled sky in a violent dance of bursts and counterattacks. Ogawa's Ki-84, Hayate, is theoretically superior in climb rate and turn performance. But theory means little against what he now faces. Moore's aircraft has crossed an ocean and still fights with unrestrained power. Then Moore makes a decision that would later be studied by aviation historians for decades. He sacrifices altitude for speed, diving from 15,000 to 8,000 feet in a controlled descent that burns valuable fuel. Any ordinary long-range pilot would be conserving every drop for the return trip. But Moore is not ordinary. He trades fuel for tactical advantage, knowing his Mustang's design gives him both endurance and control. Ogawa follows, but too late realizes the trap. The P-51's superior high-speed stability gives Moore the upper hand. Because of its efficient engine and aerodynamic frame, the Mustang retains energy in the dive that Ogawa's aircraft cannot match. The Japanese pilot hesitates, calculating his dwindling fuel supply. Moore does not. He presses the attack. For the first time, Japan's best pilots understand what they are truly facing, not just a new fighter, but a weapon born from a fusion of engineering brilliance and industrial might. The P-51 Mustang has turned distance, once Japan's greatest shield, into America's most lethal advantage. At 8,000 feet, Major Moore pulls his P-51 Mustang into a sharp climbing left turn, lining up his guns on Captain Ogawa's Ki-84. The 6.50 caliber machine guns roar to life, firing in perfect synchronization. A concentrated stream of bullets rips through the left wing of Ogawa's aircraft, striking its fuel tank and setting it ablaze. For a brief instant, the sky flashes with fire. As his Ki-84 spirals downward toward the streets of Tokyo, Captain Ogawa's final thought captures the full weight of the moment. If they can come this far, and fight this long, we have already lost the war. By 07:14 hours, only 16 minutes after the first contact, the battle is over. 7 Japanese fighters have been destroyed. 2 P-51 Mustangs bear damage from return fire, but both remain operational and will complete the long flight back to Iwo Jima, a round trip of more than 1,250 miles, an achievement once thought impossible for any single-engine aircraft. As the surviving Mustangs regroup and head home, their fuel gauges still show nearly 3 hours of flight time remaining. In Tokyo's command centers, the stunned voices of Japanese ground controllers echo across the radio frequencies. All units, report status. How many American fighters are still operational? Are they withdrawing to their carriers? Control, there are no carriers within 500 miles. Then where are they going? Flight Sergeant Kenji Nakamura, one of the few who survived the engagement, will later write in his diary. Today I saw the future of air warfare, and it terrifies me. If the Americans can send fighters anywhere in our empire with fuel to spare, then nowhere is safe. The homeland is no longer protected by distance. That April morning marks a turning point. The age of American air supremacy over Japan has begun. Carried by aircraft that have redefined the boundaries of range and power, Captain Masao Swanaga never returned from that day. Weeks later, his Ki-84 Hayate was found wrecked in a rice field outside Tokyo. Its fuel tanks were empty. A single .50 caliber round had struck him through the heart. His death became a symbol of a nation's new reality, the moment when the impossible became routine. When American fighters claimed uncontested control of the skies above Japan, the psychological impact of that first long-range Mustang mission rippled through the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force like an earthquake. Sergeant Nakamura's diary captured the despair shared by every surviving pilot. For 3 years, we fought Americans who always turned back at our coastline. Now they come and go as they please, with fuel to hunt us like rabbits in our own sky. Within days, Japan's entire air defense doctrine was forced to change. The comfort of distance, once the empire's greatest shield, was gone forever. The P-51D Mustang, with its extraordinary range of 1,650 miles, erased the mathematical limits that had once safeguarded Japan's heartland. No city, no airfield, and no industrial center was beyond reach. Because of American engineering and determination, the Pacific no longer protected Japan. It had become the pathway through which victory would descend from the sky. The numbers themselves reveal the magnitude of Japan's new nightmare. Between April 7th and August 15th, 1945, American P-51 Mustangs flew 51 very long-range missions over the Japanese home islands. Each mission covered an average round trip of more than 1,250 miles. Distances that would have been dismissed as pure fantasy only months earlier. In total, American fighter pilots claimed 341 Japanese aircraft destroyed while losing just 62 Mustangs. But the real damage went far beyond aircraft losses. The true devastation was psychological, the collapse of Japanese pilot morale. Master Sergeant Izumu Sasaki, a veteran ace who survived the war with 38 confirmed victories, later reflected on that turning point. After April 1945, he said, "We stopped believing we could win. If the Americans could send fighters from Iwo Jima to Tokyo with fuel to spare, what else could they do? Where could we hide?" His words capture the sense of hopelessness that spread across Japan's air defense forces as the skies above their homeland became a battlefield they could no longer control. The P-51 Mustang had achieved more than just a military triumph. It had triggered a revolution in strategic thinking. Because of the Merlin engine's remarkable fuel efficiency, combined with the Mustang's aerodynamic design and large internal fuel capacity, the limits of air warfare were rewritten. For years, Japanese tactics had relied on exploiting the short range of American fighters, but those days ended abruptly. The hunters had become the hunted. The Japanese found themselves outranged, outgunned, and pursued across their own skies. Captain Tomojiro Ogawa's final radio transmission before his Ki-84 plunged into Tokyo Bay became a grim prophecy. "If they can come this far, we have already lost the war." He was right. The moment American fighters gained the ability to project power across entire oceans, Japan's strategic balance collapsed. Aircraft factories that had once been protected by distance were now struck regularly with precision attacks. The empire's air defense network crumbled under the weight of a reality it had never prepared for. By the summer of 1945, Japanese desperation had reached its peak. Experienced pilots like Warrant Officer Kenji Fujioto resorted to ramming B-29 bombers not from blind fanaticism, but from the bitter recognition that their traditional tactics were useless. The Americans could strike anywhere, at any time, and still return home with fuel to spare. Today, historians and military analysts view the Mustang's long-range missions as a defining example of how technological innovation can reshape the art of war. Those flights from Iwo Jima to Tokyo are still studied as proof that range, endurance, and strategic reach can become decisive weapons. The gleaming silver Mustangs that terrified Japanese pilots on April 7, 1945, did more than win battles in the sky. They redefined what was possible in warfare. Because of them, the idea of distance as protection vanished forever. So the next time you see a P-51 Mustang gleaming under museum lights or soaring at an air show, remember Captain Masao Suwanaga's haunting final question. How did they get here? The answer marked the moment the world changed, when technology transformed the impossible into the inevitable.